Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Livingston of Want Leverage Communications, and I'm here for another episode of PR Patter, my weekly podcast where I talk to the amazing folks from across my marketing and public relations network. If you like this podcast, you might want to see the others that we've done in the series. So look up Want Leverage on YouTube or on Spotify. Look for PR Patter with Julie Livingston, and you can listen to PR Patter as well. Today, I'm delighted to have Gemma Brown as my special guest. Gemma is Director of Digital Solutions at EXT Marketing, which is a financial services marketing agency with offices in New York, Toronto, and London. And it's so good to see you here today, Gemma. Gemma
Great to see
advises her
you.
Gemma advises her clients and develops digital marketing strategies for companies that are really looking to extend their brand power. And I love that term, brand power, drive growth, and tap into new target audiences. A little bit about Gemma. She graduated from McGill University with a BA in political science. I want to know more about that and how you got into this end of things, Gemma. And she's completed her Canadian securities course. She's held various high-profile roles in the financial services sector, specializing in digital marketing strategy, relationship management, corporate development, and operations. And she currently resides in New York City. We were just talking about that, how much you love New York. So welcome, Gemma. And could you start by telling us a little bit more about your backstory and kind of how you got to EXT Marketing and where you are today?
Yeah, totally. So it's funny that you mentioned that about the political science degree. A
Yeah.
lot of people ask me how I got into financial services marketing from that. And I have been in financial services marketing throughout my entire career, but I thought it was quite an easy pivot. I was always really interested in current affairs. I specialize in the political economy. So I knew I wanted to be in financial services in some capacity. And I think a lot of people who go into financial services marketing can resonate on this front. But I knew I wanted to be in financial services, but I also wanted to do something a little bit more creative. And so it was
Cool.
always kind of a toss up of like, do I want to do something more traditional? Do I want to do something more creative? So I interned at a bank. I actually interned at EXT too when I was in college and ended up coming back years
Oh,
later. Yeah, so I've known our co-CEOs, Richard and Jillian, for a long time. But after graduating, I worked at a fintech and then in a wealth management firm, mostly on the communications and business and corporate development side. And then now I'm more on the digital strategy. So I've done pretty much everything within financial services marketing in terms of each of those disciplines. But I knew that I wanted to do something that was in finance, but a little bit more creative. So financial services marketing is a great place to start for someone that wants to do both, because not only do you have to be, involved in current affairs, know what's happening, know what the market trends are, but then you actually get to turn that into copy and creative design. So I knew I wanted to be in it from, honestly, probably my freshman year of college. And then from there, it's been kind of looking at every different aspect of the industry. And I think digital strategy is something that has probably compelled me most to this point, because it is such a new area and it's still developing. And it is the ability to kind of tap into market trends, but then also to work on getting to those target audiences, which is something that financial services firms are probably most focused on right now.
that is so interesting. How you just knew from when you the minute you started your your college degree, what you wanted to do. And I love the connection that you made from political science to business. I also am really thrilled to hear that an internship led you to your career path, because people can sometimes underplay the value of internships, and it really is and was your launching pad, it sounds like.
Totally. Yeah. I definitely think that being able to do different internships in college was something that helped me decided what I want to do after graduation, then obviously since then I've worked at a few different companies in different roles. But I think like a lot of the times it is educating yourself on the opportunities that are out there and then kind of figuring out what you like and what you don't like. And then you get to that stage in your career when you can actually craft your own role in your own company. So I think that, like failure and trying and seeing what works and seeing what you like and what you're good at is kind of the best way to get where you want to be.
Wonderful. So let's dive into today's topic, which is marketing to target investors. And let's start from the beginning. So, how does a company identify their target investor? Is it based on the offering type?
I think that is, and this is why, Julie, when we were connecting before this, that's kind of where I wanted to start. I do think a lot of founders and company executives don't put enough weight into that step one. It's always we want to raise capital, we want to get new investors, but a lot of the times they're not thinking from step one, which is why are we raising capital and who are we raising capital from and how do we plan on reaching them? And I think that first kind of conversation and that first decision is the most important because now we're lucky to live in an age where there are so many different ways to raise capital. It used to be you IPO'd or you went to get equity and capital from private equity firms, venture capital firms, institutional investors. Those are still probably the most well-known and well-regarded ways to raise capital. And in a lot of ways, they should be too. But I think as times have evolved, there are a lot of new strategies and new ways and new audience types. And I think determining what audience type and what type of investor is right for your company is something that is super important and it is overlooked. So I would say starting with why, that first step of who are you trying to raise capital from and do you want to go public? Do you want to divulge some control of your company, but also have a skilled team that are going to help you scale it? Or are you at that stage where you want to do equity crowdfunding? You think retail investors and potentially consumers and clients could help fuel your growth? I think determining who to go after is something that it's an incredibly important first step.
Not only is it important to identify it at the beginning, but to constantly go back to, so that it keeps you on track all through your marketing over time. Who is our target investor? That may change over time, right?
Totally. And I think assessing the tangibles of your own company is something that's very important. Like we have lots of clients and have worked with lots of companies that come in with this idea of, hey, this other company did it this way and they're super successful. But that might not always be the right stage or the right area for their company. And it might not be the right idea for their company at that specific size and at that specific intersection. So I think a lot of the times it is revisiting that and looking at, okay, for my industry compared to my peers, for our type of management style, for what our growth plan is, what area can get us there easiest or makes the most sense for our specific business. And I think that's something that's, as you're right, Julie, is important to keep revisiting because things change and you might not be ready to go public 3 or 1 year in, like a lot of companies try to, but you might be able to in 10 years once the company has started to grow. You already have an investor community. You've already been able to attract institutional capital. I think being able to revisit that and keep thinking about what makes the most sense at that specific interflection point is something that's really going to help your business grow over time. And it's something that you're right, not a lot of founders do think about as kind of an evolving strategy.
And also, I have been noticing, and you probably have too, that companies are now realizing the value in niching down and really identifying niche targets, or in this case, niche investors, right, who would be interested in being a part of it.
Definitely. I mean, there are so many different ways to raise capital right now. And obviously, it would be amiss of me not to kind of reflect on the fact that it has been a difficult fundraising climate for the last couple years, regardless of offering type. And I think that means that businesses shouldn't be afraid to raise capital, but they're going to need to assign a little bit more strategic thinking and more resources to who they're trying to raise capital from and what makes the most sense for them, as we discussed, than they may have had to 3 to 5 years ago. I think it's something that
Right.
evolves, and being able to do a little bit of research and tap into your network and talk to experts and really get a second opinion is something that's going to help, and it's going to help identify what target audience is going to be right for your
That's
business.
good. So, what's the best way then to take the next step and craft a communications and marketing strategy to target this audience or audiences? What do you need to know, and how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think thinking about the audience type, and once you've defined your target investor, you really need to think about what that target investor is going to assess and what they're looking for. And kind of step one, which we always advise our clients, is what is your messaging? What is your value proposition? What is your mission statement? I think having that consolidated is going to help you regardless of audience type, but institutional and accredited investors are going to look at things very differently than retail investors. And being able to package that and craft a message that works for that audience type is very important. That's not to say that you should be changing your ethos when you're raising capital
Right.
and you should be using an entirely different message for retail than accredited, but you need to have multiple key messages. It actually is very interesting for me when we speak with founders, and sometimes question one, we put them on the spot and we say, what's your value proposition? What differentiates you from your competitors? Like, why should investors entrust you with their capital?
Right. Why
And they
should they
kind of
care? Right.
they
Should they
kind of
care to get
freeze.
involved?
And maybe they're not
Really?
expecting their marketing agency to be asking them that. So it's kind of funny. We're like, we obviously don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think step one is really what makes your company stand out. What are you doing better than your competitors? And having the answer of we're innovating the industry is not a good not a good answer, because every company says that they're doing that. I think having those proof points, having that pitch, having those assets ready to go and a clear key message is going to help investors, regardless of which type of investor that is, really understand why they are interested in your company, why they should invest in your company, and why they should really be a part of
Sure.
that growth.
That's great. That's really helpful. So, you learn about who your key target investors are. How do you convert prospects to actually being investors in your new venture?
I think once we determine what that key message should be, it's a good idea to think what kind of methods you're going to use to reach out for them. And there are a lot of methods available out there. I mean, I'll never discount a friends and family raise. I think tapping into your network first is the most important. And it's always a little bit of a red flag for us when we're talking with companies and they don't have anyone in their network that they can
Ah,
leverage. I think being able to get some testimonials, having a clear proof of concept, already having raised some capital from your network, it doesn't need to be into the hundreds of millions. Like, founders should be able to raise, we usually advise like bare minimum 100K from their network, because that also shows investors who don't know you that there are other people within your industry, within your network, with even outside of it, but that you've been able to source independently, that see that this is a viable concept. And I think once you've been able to raise, or once you at least have some investor testimonials, you've started to build that community, it is possible to go the marketing route. I think in terms of conversion, digital campaigns is something that we've leveraged pretty successfully for our clients. But you also need to consider budgetary constraints, because marketing and digital marketing and social media and native advertising can be costly. So I think actually tying that into your fiscal year budget, looking at, do we have the resources to take this on? If not, what other avenues can we explore, will help you as part of the conversion process, because you need to have a clear funnel. you need to understand, okay, how are we reaching out to these investors? Is it through a warm introduction? Is it through digital or social advertising? And once we reach them, what kind of funnel are we going to have them follow in order to convert them? Like if it's an advertisement, where are we directing them to? What kind of information are we giving them? Is it an investor deck? Is it a lead magnet? How do we then capture their information so we can nurture them? And then how many times do you want to nurture them? Like we often tell our clients it takes 7 to 12 touch
Right.
points to
That's the
convert an
marketing rule of
investor.
thumb, right? 7 impressions.
Exactly. And
How does,
these days it's more like 12. So I think being able to
wow.
have that funnel figured out is going to help you understand where, when, and how you're going to be able to convert that audience.
Okay. I've got my public relations hat on now. How does public relations play a role in attracting potential investors?
That's a great question. And again, something that we often tell to our clients is that being able to engage different partners for different disciplines is something that is extremely important, especially if you are raising from multiple different audience groups or your raise target is high and the actual time that you have to raise the capital is a longer term horizon. You need to have PR, marketing, and IR intertwined. There are not a lot of agencies who will do an excellent job at all three, which is why we tap into our partners and on the PR and IR side,
Right. I mean,
and we
that's how
all
we
work
worked
together.
together originally. That's how we met originally.
Exactly. It's definitely important to tie in different partners and different experts in their field to be able to create like a comprehensive 360 marketing PR IR strategy. And that's really going to help your company stand the test of time. I think a lot of things that we talk to our partners and our clients about is once they've raised the capital, once they've completed their first round, what comes next? And the thing about marketing and brand building, and especially PR exposure, is that that is going to take you well beyond that first round. It's going to take you well beyond the second. And not many companies are going to be satisfied with closing their first round and then, surviving on that capital for growing
Right.
their company throughout the time. So I think having a PR and IR and marketing strategy that's going to get you beyond that to whatever your next business objective is something that it's important to factor in early.
So it kind of lays the groundwork for the future. I think
A
that's what
hundred
you're saying.
percent,
Yeah, no, that's great.
definitely.
Um, would love to hear about maybe some lessons that you and EXT marketing have learned along the way. And maybe you could share a case study or two with us.
Absolutely. I think EXT is uniquely positioned because we are a financial services marketing agency that does specialize one division in helping companies raise capital, but our primary target audience, specifically going back like the last 15 years that EXT has been around, has been actually working on the institutional side. So not only do we help companies raise capital, but we interestingly work on the family offices, the investment firms, all of the companies that they're trying to raise capital from. We also help them with their marketing. So I think we can see it from both sides, and we're able to build a use case for both audience types. And I think that's something that has been able to really help us
Mm,
understand each of the individual investor types and what they're actually looking for, and what kind of verbiage, what kind of messaging, what kind of strategy works to convert them. So I think that's something that we've learned is you have to be able to see it from both sides. You're not just selling the company, you are selling the company to the investors, and you need to understand their investment thesis. You need to understand market cycles. You need to understand what they're vetting and what kind of opportunities they're open to be order to actually convert them effectively. I think what is important to know too, and something that we've seen is like right now the market is saturated. And as I said earlier, it's not going to be a
right.
surprise to anyone listening, but it has been a difficult fundraising environment. So you really need to get out ahead of that and start building that brand and messaging first. It is much easier to build the kind of grounding blocks and then find your investor and then convert your investor. It's not easy to find your investor and then try to build a brand and then try to build a message. So I think having a clear strategy and a clear step and not trying to do it too quickly and too sporadically is something that's going to help you actually grow your business in a sustainable way. So that's something that we've learned. And in terms of case studies, I mean, we've worked kind of throughout the board on IPOs, post-listing campaigns, equity crowdfunding, brand awareness. So we've worked with fintechs, financial firms, obviously, real estate firms, oil and gas. We've worked kind of throughout every industry type and every type of investor. And something that we keep coming back to with our clients is the reasons why capital raises fail are the same depending on whatever industry and size of business you are. And a lot of it is that planning to fail and not putting enough time or the adequate resources into crafting your strategy and then having a team together that's actually going to help you implement it.
Yeah. But what have you learned along the way? Like what, and I know you've learned about how to really target um, the investor, but were there any things that came as a surprise to the team in working with particular companies, or did you have a particular client that posed a unique challenge?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. And as I said, I think a lot of the challenges end up being remarkably similar. I think what has really interested us and what we've had with some specific clients where that kind of massive roadblock of what actually prevented them from raising the capital that they needed was a lack of an adequate conversion strategy.
Ah,
So once you actually find the investor, as we talked about earlier, it's having a strategy to convert them. And a lot of the times companies think, we'll have our CEO follow up with the institutional investors. We'll have him on the call.
but is
But
that
then
enough? Is that enough?
it's not. And the thing is, this is a massive time suck. And especially if you're trying to raise from institutional and accredited, you better answer their emails an hour after they send them, or at least a day after they send them. You cannot sit on capital, you cannot sit on opportunities for a week or two. And I think a lot of our clients and a lot of other companies do not have an IR team together or an internal executive team that is willing, able, or has the adequate amount of time to nurture and follow up with these investors. And that's typically where we see capital raises fail, is that, once you find that investor, how are you going to convert them? And I think being able to make the time to meet with them, either in person, virtual, following up to their calls, following up to their emails, it's pretty shocking about how many companies will be like, we really want to raise capital from this group. And then they find that group and then they just don't spend enough time actually converting them. So I think that's something that surprised us because typically and previously before we really got into this space, we thought that it would be the offering itself and how they're positioning themselves. But beyond that, I think how you're actually converting the investors and how frequently you're following up with them is something that we didn't think would be as crucial as it has ended up being in all of our
Interesting.
specific use cases.
Wow. So you've really got to focus on the target investor's needs all
Absolutely.
every step of the way and continue doing it. Well, that's also building that relationship, right?
Totally. Everything is about building a relationship. And I think this goes beyond raising capital, but you're building a relationship as a business owner or as an executive team with your clients or your customers and your investors. And beyond the product type, beyond the splashy marketing, what's really going to get you to that next goal and that next stage is building relationships with your partners, with your vendors, with your customers. And I think it's something that is usually an afterthought. But it is something that it is crucial to work in as part of that strategy because all companies succeed on the strength of their relationship, whatever stage of business or industry they're in.
Right, right, right. Well, Gemma, I have learned a ton during this conversation. I'm sure others have as well. And I just want to thank you for being here with me today. Really appreciate your time and the knowledge and insights that you bring to this particular subject. Everyone else, I will see you next time on another episode of PR Patter.
Thanks, Julie.